The ashes still breathe. The fire has long gone out, yet its memory clings to the air, heavy and unyielding. The once great man of Uzi now sits where his home once stood, among ruins, among ghosts. The wind moves through shattered beams and broken pottery, whispering a language only grief can understand. 7 days have passed in silence. 7 nights beneath an unblinking sky. Job does not speak. His friends do not dare. The air itself seems afraid to move, as if one breath too loud might shatter what remains of him. But the heart cannot stay silent forever. Somewhere inside the man who once blessed the heavens, a storm is forming, not of rage, but of sorrow, the kind that no words can contain, yet cannot stay buried. The world has taken everything from him: his wealth, his children, his health, his peace. Yet something still lives, a trembling spark beneath the ashes. And when he opens his mouth, that spark becomes a cry that will shake the heavens. This is not rebellion. It is revelation. The breaking of silence. The birth of lament. For faith that has never wept has never truly lived. And as the sun rises again over the land of Uzi, a voice will rise with it, raw, honest, wounded, and holy. The voice of a man who has lost everything, yet still searches for God in the smoke of his ruin. This is the lament of the broken. Dawn came, but it did not bring comfort. The sun rose over the ruins of Uzi, as if unaware of what it shone upon. The light touched the ash heaps where Job sat, and for the first time since creation, it seemed that sunlight itself could feel shame. The breeze carried the faint scent of charred fields and broken wood. Every sound, the creak of a distant cart, the cry of a raven, reminded him that life still moved on, even when his own had stopped. 7 days and 7 nights had passed in silence. His friends sat beside him, motionless, their faces carved with pity and fear. They had watched the strongest man they knew fade into a shadow of himself, skin torn, eyes hollow, spirit bruised beyond knowing. And though their hearts ached for him, they did not understand him. None could, but grief cannot stay buried. Like thunder trapped beneath the earth, it eventually breaks free. And on the morning of the 8th day, Job opened his mouth. His voice was dry and used, trembling as if the air itself resisted what was about to be said. "Let the day perish," he whispered, "on which I was born." The words slipped out like blood from a wound, quiet at first, then stronger, heavier, impossible to stop. "Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it. Let the shadow of death claim it." His friends bowed their heads, but Job did not see them. His eyes were fixed on nothing, staring past the dust, past the sky, into a space between life and eternity where reason no longer lived. He had not cursed God, but now he cursed existence itself. Why did I not die from the womb? Why did knees receive me? Why were there breasts to nurse me? Every word struck the air like a hammer on stone. This was not rebellion, it was revelation. The sound of faith unraveling, not to die, but to find what lies beneath it. In the courts of heaven, angels listened. The accuser leaned forward, certain he was about to hear the curse he longed for. But the curse never came. What came instead was something far deeper, the language of a soul confronting the silence of God. Job lifted his face to the sky, tears cutting paths through the dust on his cheeks. "Why is life given to those in misery?" he cried. "To those bitter of soul, who long for death, but it comes not. Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in?" The words shook. They trembled with accusation and awe in the same breath. The man who once praised God for everything now questioned the very purpose of his own heartbeat. And yet, even in that questioning, there was still faith. Because only one who still believes dares to ask why. He lowered his head, trembling. Around him, the world was still. A single flame from the nearby lamp flickered in the wind. In its light, his face seemed carved from the same dust he sat in. Mortal, fragile, ancient. He remembered the days when that same mouth had spoken blessing after blessing, when his prayers had covered his children like morning dew. Now, every word was a wound, every breath a battle. His friends shifted uneasily. Eliphaz, the oldest among them, reached forward as if to speak, but his hand fell back to his knee. There are moments when no wisdom fits, when even the righteous must be silent in the presence of another's grief. Job's voice grew softer, as if speaking to himself. "For the thing I greatly feared has come upon me," he said. "That which I dreaded has happened to me. I am not at ease. I am not quiet. Trouble comes." The words hung in the air, naked, trembling, human. And in that raw honesty, heaven was moved. For truth spoken in pain is still truth, and God does not despise it. The camera of heaven draws close again, close enough to see the dust cling to Job's tears, close enough to hear the faint sound of his breath between sobs. He was not angry at God. He was searching for him. His lament was not rebellion, but longing, a cry for the God who had always answered and now seemed silent. Somewhere beyond the veil, that silence was not absence, it was listening. The same God who once blessed him was now letting him speak into the void, teaching the world that faith does not end when the blessing does. Job's words rolled on like waves breaking upon rocks. "Why give light to the weary?" he said again. "Why breathe life into those who only wait for the grave? For sighing comes before my food, and my groanings pour out like water." He pressed his hands to his face, his body trembling. "When I remember my bed," he whispered, "I say, my couch shall ease my complaint. But you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions. When I lie down, I think, when shall I arise? But the night stretches long, and I am full of tossings till dawn." Every word echoed through the still morning. His lament was not polished, not rehearsed. It was the cry of a man laid bare. And heaven, though silent, was not cold, for the one who allowed the test was the same who would redeem it. In the distance, thunder rumbled faintly, the first hint of storms that would one day answer him. Job's eyes lifted once more toward the horizon. "I loathe my life," he whispered. "I will give free course to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul." And as his voice broke, something unseen stirred, the faint pulse of divine patience. This was not the end of faith. It was the breaking open of it, the moment when religion falls silent and relationship begins to speak. Job's lament rose like incense through the ashes, raw but real, cracked but clean. And above, the hosts of heaven watched as the man on the ash heap became the vessel of a mystery they themselves longed to understand. The mystery of love that survives without reward, of faith that refuses to die even when hope seems gone. The sun climbed higher. His friends sat still, their hearts divided between compassion and confusion. None of them knew that this was the holy beginning of a conversation that would stretch across the cosmos. Job, exhausted, leaned forward, his eyes closed. The wind touched his face gently, like a whisper. And though he could not see it, the silence that surrounded him was already preparing to speak. Because God had not abandoned him. He was waiting. And in the waiting, the story of humanity's deepest faith was being written, one tear, one question, one whispered breath at a time. The morning after Job's cry hung over the land like mist, heavy, haunting, unwilling to lift. The ashes were cool now, but the memory of pain still burned. The friends who had sat in silence through 7 long nights exchanged glances, their hearts full, their minds troubled. They had come to comfort him, but the weight of his words unsettled them. To hear a righteous man curse the day of his birth was something they could not reconcile. Eliphaz, oldest among them, the one known for gentle counsel and calm reasoning, lifted his head first. His beard, streaked with age, caught the wind as he spoke. His voice was slow, measured, carrying the tone of one who believes he understands the mind of God. "If one ventures a word with you," he began, "will you be grieved? But who can withhold himself from speaking? Behold, you have instructed many, and you have strengthened weak hands. Your words have upheld him who was falling. But now it comes to you, and you are weary." Job turned slightly, his eyes hollow but alert. Eliphaz continued, his tone soft yet piercing. "Is not your fear of God your confidence, and your integrity your hope? Remember, I pray you, whoever perished being innocent? Or where were the upright cut off? Those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same." The words were meant as comfort, but they fell like stones upon the wounded. Job's lips trembled, but he did not answer. His friend's reasoning came from a world where pain was a punishment and blessing the proof of righteousness. But Job lived now in another world, one where the innocent suffer and heaven stays silent. Eliphaz pressed on, convinced of his wisdom. "A word was brought to me secretly," he said, his eyes distant as though recalling a dream. "In thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, fear came upon me and trembling. Then a spirit passed before my face. The hair on my flesh stood up. I heard a voice whisper, 'Shall mortal man be more just than God? Shall a man be more pure than his maker?' The others nodded, half in awe, half in agreement. To them, it made sense. Job must have sinned. No one suffers this much without reason. But heaven knew what earth did not, that this was not judgment, but testimony." Job's fingers closed around a handful of ash, letting it slip between them like sand through time. His voice, when it came, was slow and strained, as though each word cost him the weight of breath itself. "Surely," he said, "you have spoken as all men speak when they cannot understand another's pain. Oh, that my grief were fully weighed, and my calamity laid in the balances together, for it would outweigh the sand of the sea." He looked up at Eliphaz, and in his eyes there was no anger, only sorrow. "Teach me, and I will hold my peace. Cause me to understand wherein I have erred. But your reproofs, are they not like wind?" His voice cracked. "Have I asked you for anything? Have I said, 'Deliver me'? No, I have only asked for understanding." The wind stirred between them, swirling the ash into small ghosts that danced and vanished. Bildad, unable to stay silent, rose to speak. He was younger, proud, a man of principles that never bent. His voice was firm, righteous, certain. "How long will you speak these things?" he said. "Does God pervert judgment? Does the Almighty pervert justice? If your children have sinned against him, he has cast them away for their transgression. But if you would earnestly seek God, if you were pure and upright, surely now he would awake for you and restore your rightful place." Job flinched. The mention of his children pierced deeper than any boil or scar. He pressed his hand against his chest, breathing through the pain. When he finally answered, his voice was like the sound of dry reeds breaking in the wind. "I know that God is just," he said, "but how can a man be righteous before him? Though I were righteous, my own mouth would condemn me. He is not a man, as I am, that I should answer him, that we should come together in judgment." He paused, eyes lifting toward the pale horizon. "If only there were a mediator between us," he whispered. "Someone to lay his hand upon us both, to remove his rod from me, so that I may not fear him." The words hung in the air, ancient and prophetic. Unknowingly, Job had spoken of something far beyond his time, a longing that would one day be answered in the fullness of redemption. Zophar, the youngest, restless and sharp-tongued, could not hold his silence. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Should your words go unanswered? Should your boastful talk make men hold their peace? You say, 'My doctrine is pure,' but oh, that God would speak and open his lips against you. Know that God exacts from you less than your iniquity deserves." The air thickened. Even the dust seemed to recoil. Job's eyes, once full of warmth, now blazed with something new, not rebellion, but desperation. "Indeed," he said, "you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior. Who knows not such things as these?" He rose slowly, every movement heavy with pain. His figure, frail and broken, stood silhouetted against the light. "I will speak to the Almighty," he declared. "I desire to reason with God." The friends exchanged anxious glances, horrified by his boldness. But Job was not being arrogant. He was being honest. He was a man caught between faith and fire, still reaching upward even as the sky remained silent. He lifted his eyes to heaven. "Though he slay me," he whispered, "yet will I trust him. But I will maintain my own ways before him." He sank back to the ground, exhausted, trembling. His voice softened. "Man who is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. He comes forth like a flower and fades away. He flees like a shadow and continues not. Why then do you open your eyes upon such a one and bring me into judgment with you?" The friend said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The wind moved again, gentle, low, almost musical. The ashes stirred, and for a brief moment, Job felt the faintest sense of peace. Not relief, not restoration, but the quiet presence of something near. He did not yet know it, but his honesty was building a bridge toward revelation. His lament had become the seed of wisdom that would outlive all of them. Above, heaven still watched. The angels leaned closer. The accuser frowned, for even in complaint, Job's faith endured. The night fell softly over the hills of Uzi. The stars returned, shimmering over the desolation like diamonds scattered upon sorrow. Job's friends huddled near the dying fire, whispering to one another, unsure whether to pity or fear him. And there, in the flicker of fading flame, the greatest conversation between man and God continued in silence, waiting for the day when the voice would finally answer from the whirlwind. Night stretched thin over Uzi, and Job's breath misted in the cool air as if even his spirit sought a way out. The fire collapsed upon itself with a soft hiss, and in that dim hush his thoughts moved like wounded animals, slow, wary, unable to rest. He spoke again, not to win a debate, but to keep from drowning in silence. "If your children have sinned against him, he has cast them away for their transgression. But if you would earnestly seek God, if you were pure and upright, surely now he would awake for you and restore your rightful place." Job flinched. The mention of his children pierced deeper than any boil or scar. He pressed his hand against his chest, breathing through the pain. When he finally answered, his voice was like the sound of dry reeds breaking in the wind. "I know that God is just," he said, "but how can a man be righteous before him? Though I were righteous, my own mouth would condemn me. He is not a man, as I am, that I should answer him, that we should come together in judgment." He paused, eyes lifting toward the pale horizon. "If only there were a mediator between us," he whispered. "Someone to lay his hand upon us both, to remove his rod from me, so that I may not fear him." The words hung in the air, ancient and prophetic. Unknowingly, Job had spoken of something far beyond his time, a longing that would one day be answered in the fullness of redemption. Zophar, the youngest, restless and sharp-tongued, could not hold his silence. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Should your words go unanswered? Should your boastful talk make men hold their peace? You say, 'My doctrine is pure,' but oh, that God would speak and open his lips against you. Know that God exacts from you less than your iniquity deserves." The air thickened. Even the dust seemed to recoil. Job's eyes, once full of warmth, now blazed with something new, not rebellion, but desperation. "Indeed," he said, "you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior. Who knows not such things as these?" He rose slowly, every movement heavy with pain. His figure, frail and broken, stood silhouetted against the light. "I will speak to the Almighty," he declared. "I desire to reason with God. If only my grief could be measured," he murmured, eyes following a coal's last glow. "If only my case could be written in iron, graved upon the rock forever." He did not speak to impress his friends. He spoke to survive his own heart. The words he had once saved for altars now pressed through cracked lips. and every syllable bore the weight of a world he no longer recognized. Eliphaz shifted as though to comfort him and said nothing. Bildad watched for an opening to restore the neat geometry of cause and effect. Zophar's mouth tightened with judgments he mistook for courage. But Job kept speaking, not to them, not entirely. He addressed the emptiness where he had once felt God's nearness. "You have fenced me in," he whispered, "and I cannot pass. You have set darkness in my paths." His fingers found a shard of pottery and turned it over and over, the edge tracing circles in his palm, a small pain to distract a greater one. "I cry out to you, but you do not answer. I stand, and you merely look at me." The wind rose, sifting ash into the starlight. He remembered how dawn used to arrive with a promise and how prayer used to open doors inside him. Now the same dawn pried his eyes open to more sleeplessness, more questions, more of the same weary ground. "My days are swifter than a runner," he said, and the image gathered strength in him. "They have slipped past like reed boats on a river, like an eagle descending on prey." He tried to steady his breath. "I will forget my complaint. I will put off my sad face," he resolved, and even as he said it, he knew it would fail. "But I am afraid of all my sorrows, for I know you will not hold me innocent." The words tasted like iron. He could not bear falsehood with God, even in prayer. The very impulse to tidy his grief felt like a lie. He lifted his face. "You, who once hedged me in with blessing, have now hedged me in with silence. If I wash myself with snow, if I cleanse my hands with lye, still you plunge me into the pit so that my own garments abhor me." And then, the ache within him shaped itself into a longing larger than the night. "He is not a man, as I am, that I might answer him, that we should come together in judgment. If only there were an umpire between us, one who could lay his hand upon us both. Then would he remove his rod from me, and I would not fear." The friends exchanged glances at this unheard-of petition, but Job's voice softened with hope he had not known he kept. He spoke it as one who whispers to a door he believes is locked and still tries the handle, just in case. He drew a breath that scraped his throat on the way in and spoke again from a deeper chamber. "I loathe my life. I will leave my complaint upon myself. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Show me why you contend with me." The words trembled, not with rebellion, but with reverence that refuses to flatter. "Is it good for you to oppress," he asked, "to despise the work of your hands, and smile upon the counsel of the wicked? Your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now destroy me?" He remembered the invisible artistry by which bones knit and sinews formed, each cell a mystery of attention. "You clothed me with skin and flesh, knit me together with bones and sinews. You granted me life and steadfast love, and your care preserved my spirit." His eyes closed. "Yet these things you hid in your heart," he said, hearing in the sentence both accusation and awe. "I know that this was your purpose." The night creaked, the way houses sometimes do when old timber learns to live with strain. Job's voice steadied, not because his pain diminished, but because the act of speaking drew him toward a center he had thought lost. "Man born of woman," he said, "is of few days and full of trouble. He springs up like a flower and withers. He flees like a shadow and does not continue. Turn from him that he may rest, like a hired man who completes his day." The rhythm of it soothed him, frailty confessed without shame. "There is hope for a tree," he mused, half smiling without joy, "that if it is cut down it will sprout again, its tender shoots will not cease. Through the scent of water it will bud and put forth boughs like a plant. But a man dies and lies low. Man breathes his last, and where is he?" He stared into the dark. He could imagine an answer. He could not feel it. If a man dies, shall he live again? The question hung, all edge and no handle. He did not wait for the friends to respond. He went on, stepping where his heart led, one truth at a time. "My Redeemer," he began, stopping on the word as if he had discovered it in the dust. He turned it, waited. "I know that my Redeemer lives," he said then, not with the thunder of certainty, but with the tenacity of a lifeline. "And at the last he will stand upon the earth. After my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God." The friends stirred. The sentence belonged to another age and still burst into this one like a comet. "Whom I shall see for myself," he breathed, "and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me." Silence draped the words like a cloak. Even Zophar, so quick to sharpen his certainties, could not cut through that vow. Eliphaz's face softened, briefly, as if a draft from another world had brushed his cheek and left memory behind. Bildad looked down, recalculating all his axioms in the dim light, and finding that none could hold a promise that big. But the ache returned, it always did. Job's body reminded him, salt in every motion, heat under every breath. He sank back to the ash heap with a sigh that seemed older than himself. "If I cry violence, I am not answered," he said. "I call for help, there is no justice." He traced a line in the dust with the shard and watched the wind erase it. "He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass. He has set darkness upon my paths." A gust lifted the edges of his cloak. He pulled it tight and found no warmth. He turned to his friends, a plea in his voice that argued with no man, begged from no man, yet asked for something only a friend can give. "Have pity on me, have pity on me, O you my friends," he said, "for the hand of God has touched me. Why do you, like God, pursue me? Are you not satisfied with my flesh?" He searched their faces for kindness that did not wear armor, for compassion not paid in lectures. "How forcible are right words," he conceded. "But what does your arguing prove?" He held their gaze. "Teach me, and I will hold my tongue. Cause me to understand wherein I have erred. But you smear me with lies. You are all worthless physicians. Oh, that you would altogether hold your peace. That would be your wisdom." They flinched, not because he had wounded them, but because he had found the seam in their counsel where neat answers split. It stung to discover that the man in ashes was seeing more clearly than the men still whole. They had come with the dignity of doctrine. They had met a holiness they could not diagram. The moon tipped west. The small hours drifted closer to dawn. Job folded his arms across his knees, and his jaw unclenched by degrees. Weariness came like a tide finally granted entrance to a narrow bay. Through it, another thought surfaced, gentle, insistent. "If I ascend to heaven, you are there," he breathed, a scripture older than his pain. "If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there." He did not know if he believed it at that moment. He said it because once it had believed him. Some words keep vigil over a soul until the soul can keep vigil over them again. They flinched, not because he had wounded them, but because he had found the seam in their counsel where neat answers split. It stung to discover that the man in ashes was seeing more clearly than the men still whole. They had come with the dignity of doctrine. They had met a holiness they could not diagram. The moon tipped west. The small hours drifted closer to dawn. Job folded his arms across his knees, and his jaw unclenched by degrees. Weariness came like a tide finally granted entrance to a narrow bay. Through it, another thought surfaced, gentle, insistent. "If I ascend to heaven, you are there," he breathed, a scripture older than his pain. "If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there." He did not know if he believed it at that moment. He said it because once it had believed him. Some words keep vigil over a soul until the soul can keep vigil over them again. The friends dozed in turns, heads bowed, hands slack. Job remained wakeful, counting the quiet like a shepherd counts sheep at night, each stillness numbered and named. He felt the astonishing truth that he had not cursed God. He had accused, argued, questioned, sobbed, pled. He had poured out every bitterness he could find language for, and still he loved. The love was not bright, it did not sing. It was the stubborn ember that endures after wind and rain and hours of cold, dull to the eye, hot to the touch, unwilling to die. He leaned his head against the stone and let his eyes close. When sleep came, it was thin, like a veil that could be torn by the lightest sound. In that veiled space he dreamt, not of disaster, for those visions were reserved for waking, but of water, not a river, not a sea. A single cup held out to him by hands he could not see. He drank, and it tasted like the scent of rain before rain arrives. He woke to birds beginning their hesitant rehearsals of morning, a few notes here, a scrap of melody there. In the gray between darkness and light, he tried one more sentence, quiet, reckless, honest. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. He surprised himself with it, as though someone else had smuggled the line into his chest while he slept and invited him to speak it aloud. He looked at his friends with softened eyes, and for a heartbeat they saw the man who had once prayed for them by name. The sight made them ache. They could not step across their fear into the mystery with him yet. They would try again with the tools they knew, and they would wound him again without wanting to. But for the first time, something gentler moved among them. A truce, not with one another, but with the possibility that they did not know what they thought they knew. The east began to pale. Job steadied himself for another day in a life that no longer fit. He would answer again. They would insist again. The debate would lengthen until it circled itself and doubled back, and out of that circling something would rip open in the sky. But not yet. For now there was the ember, the ash, the breath he kept taking because he had not been told to stop. He lifted his face just enough to feel the first thread of warmth the sun sent over the horizon, and let it rest there like a promise he could not prove. This was how the hours passed in the land of Uzi. Words like tides, pain like weather, hope like a scent that refuses to name its source. And somewhere beyond that thin blue border where night breaks, a storm was gathering its voice, rehearsing lines no human could imagine and every human longs to hear. The counsel would continue, pages upon pages of certainty and countercry, until even certainty grew tired and the countercry became prayer. When it had all been said, every proverb polished, every doctrine deployed, every wound described without relief, then the whirlwind would stand and speak. But that is still ahead. For now, the man in the ashes holds his ember, and the friends fumble for words that do not betray love. The world turns once more toward noon, and somewhere a cup is being filled for a thirsty soul. This is the path across the long plain between lament and revelation, the road that crosses chapters and hearts alike. If you have walked with Job this far, keep walking. The next footfall lands where human wisdom gathers its last breath and the voice begins to draw near, the threshold of the counsel of the wise. Continue the journey.